I'm going to go on mute with us, with our guys. It looks like we're working now. Thank you for your attendance tonight. I had an interesting day. Janice has been very interested in a local business person. You may have heard of her. Her name is Laura. I don't remember her last name, but you may have seen her product in the grocery stores, Laura's Lean Beef. It's very interesting because it looks like she's sold part of that company, or maybe all of it, and now she's gotten into CBD oil. Yes, that's what I said, CBD oil. Janice is interested in it because she's found out some things about the science behind it. I've looked as well, and it's very interesting. We'll be covering some more information on that story in the next, over the next few weeks. We met with her today, and again, very interesting story. I'm sorry, but please hold on. Oh gosh, I hate this. Janice left and left my little friend, and she was banging on the door. I hope you guys can still see and hear me. Tonight, we're going to cover several things. One of them is inflammation. That's going to be the science part. Number two, we'll do the services update. Let's go dive right into the science. It's going to be about cardiovascular inflammation. Maybe start at about 30,000 feet and then go about as, well, not as deep as you can go, but deeper than most very quickly. So at 30,000 feet, you got your heart, your aorta, your vena cava, the big arteries and veins, and then they get smaller and smaller. What we're looking at in terms of inflammation, as you know, is the arteries themselves. Then we're going to get all the way down to the glycocalyx. And if you haven't recognized this or seen this, this is a diagram of the glycocalyx here. This is a actual picture of the glycocalyx, GCX. And this is what it looks like on a cross section. It looks like little hairs inside the artery or the arterial. That's a very small artery. So back up at 30,000 feet. I mean, if you go to like some of the Bale-Deneen courses, some of the other courses that get into this level of inflammation, they usually talk about this part, the intima, the media, and the adventia. The adventia is the outer area. It's connective tissue. It connects the artery to the rest of the tissue in the body. The media is a muscle layer. These are just all muscle cells here. And without the media, the arteries would basically just blow up. The intima is where all of the metabolic processes work, but they don't have the structural strength to hold things together, especially when you're at aortic pressures and even the more peripheral pressures of 120/80. Now, the place that's the real action spot for us and for anybody that happens to be human, especially a human baby boomer, is you're starting to get inflammation, which means you're starting to get some burning of the intima, some dysfunction of the intima. And that usually happens. It can happen for several reasons. Smoking, cigarette smoking is nuclear to the intima. Inflammatory diseases, classic one being rheumatoid arthritis, but things like lupus, those things are very, very difficult on the intima. And then, of course, by far, hands down, the most common thing is insulin resistance, which happens as we start getting older. And therefore, glucose and or insulin both rising in the bloodstream. So what do those do to cause the problem? We'll talk about that in just a second, but first of all, let's just talk about where that problem starts. Again, right here in the glycocalyx. And again, thank you. I think it was 147 West that talked 147 degrees West, mentioned few months ago. We had not talked about it. It's a great topic. It's something that you're starting to hear a little bit more about on the internet. This is again what it looks like. It's like a marsh, in a salt marsh next to a river. You have the flow with the river, you have the big fish out there, but the real metabolic stuff that's going on is going on right at the intersection between that land and the water itself. And you have grasses, you have weeds. That's where all the small fish are, the crustaceans, all of that stuff. That's where the real metabolic ecological process is going on. Same thing happens with us in our arteries. We have this thing called glycocalyx, and that is where waste materials are being pushed out back into the bloodstream, and nutrients are being, like oxygen and other things, are being taken in. Now, here's another picture, capillary lumen. Capillary is just a it's the smallest vessel. It's the vessel connection between the smallest arteries and the smallest veins. Those capillary lumens have this glycocalyx. And here's what happens. If you smoke cigarettes, if you have inflammatory disease, if you have blood sugar over 140 or 180 for 20 hours a day, your glycocalyx is going to start looking like this glycocalyx on the right, like a lawnmower came through and destroyed a lot of it. Insulin destroys it, inflammatory cells can destroy it, glucose can destroy it. Glycocalyx, it's glycogen, or sugars are a significant part making up these hairy tendrils. I've got this picture of the LDL particles over here on the right, because everybody, or not everybody, most people, most of your docs will continue to look for a high LDL. These three right here in the middle. What really matters, though, is not so much how high your LDL is. What matters is what's protecting the lining of the artery. It doesn't really matter if your LDL is 50 or 150, nearly as much as the health of your glycocalyx. Now, let's say you have a problem. Let's say you have ongoing blood sugars of 180, 200. Then you have a damaged glycocalyx for day after day, month after week after week, month after month, year after year, decade after decade. You start building up inflammation. Or first you start building up plaque. Your immune system recognizes that plaque is something that we don't want there. So whether it's an infection, a virus, a foreign body, or plaque, which is oxidized LDL in this area, then the immune system is going to send cells in. Those cells, and if you guys will let me hold the cursor just a minute, these are cells, immune cells that are coming in. This looks like a mast cell. Maybe it's a foam cell, which is a bunch of macrocytes that have bonded together in this process. You also get polymorphonucleosides. These are, pardon the jargon, immune cells, white cells, immune cells. Once you get those immune cells coming in, they release enzymes, they release chemicals which attract other immune cells. And those immune cells start releasing more enzymes and more what we call chemoattractants, or chemicals that attract more immune cells. That is what inflammation is. So a lot of people, when they hear this thing about inflammation, they don't really know what it is. This is what it is. It's where you're taking friendly fire. Your tissues are taking friendly fire. Your body is attacking something. And in this case, it's attacking itself. Now, it's still not a problem until we get to the next part. So this is a pathology slide of a real artery. It's someone who had died from a heart attack. And as you see here, this is the media, that muscle layer. This is the intima, that layer with the glycocalyx, very thin, very, not very strong. This brown stuff is a waxy substance that's made mostly of oxidized LDL. Now you see this section right here where it's lighter colored and it's sort of retracted away from the slide screen. That's because it's liquid, and it's, guess what? Hot liquid plaque. Now here's the issue. Everything is going okay in the process. The immune system's doing what it's usually supposed to do, except for this fact. If these chemicals in the hot plaque, the chemoattractants that I talked about a minute ago, the enzymes that these release, come out, break through and touch flowing blood, which is over here, then it causes a clot. So it's not really the hot plaque itself that causes the problem, it's the clot. And if the clot's big enough, goes to the heart, that's a heart attack. If the clot's big enough and it goes to the brain, that's a stroke. So I'm gonna go back up here to that previous slide and look at this for just a second. This is a different picture, same component. Again, another patient that has, I hope you didn't get a lot of noise there. Another patient that has died from one of these events, heart attack. Let me just orient you a little bit. This clearer part out here is the media, the muscle area. This is plaque, hard, stable, waxy plaque. This is the intima. As you can see, the intima cracked. Soft plaque went out in through the intima into the bloodstream. This is not soft plaque. This black stuff is clot. It's what's remaining of the clot here. The bigger part of the clot broke off, went to the heart, killed the patient. So there's something else to notice about this process that I haven't brought up yet. You see here, this brown section, that's another little area where you have inflammation and plaque being attacked by the immune system. So that brings up the point that you may have heard us say many times, why would you look in the carotid artery, an artery in the neck, to look for this process? Because it's a systemic process. If you have it in one artery bed, you have it in all of them. It's a chemical process, and that's exactly what's going on. Even in this space, just across the artery circumference in the same area, you've got another one of these going on. Another way of maybe helping understand this, there was a quote, you know, when Tim Russert died, they did an autopsy because they were thinking maybe he'd had a pulmonary embolus from a long plane ride home from Italy. No, they did not find an embolus, but what they said was his arteries looked like the pimply face of a teenager. In other words, he had multiple of these bumps with inflammation getting ready to pop. And sure enough, that's what killed him. That's what kills people with a heart attack and stroke. That's what creates the event. One of these plaques pops, releases the inflammatory ingredients. They cause a clot, and again, the clot causes the event. Now, here's an interesting point. I can't see behind my, hopefully you can see that. So inflammation, this is not something new. Time magazine, I don't think anybody would argue that Time magazine is a medical science magazine. Clearly not a medical standards magazine. They talked about inflammation causing heart attacks, and by the way, cancer and Alzheimer's as well, back in 2004. It's what, 2019 now? 15 years later after it made front page cover of a very popular, well-known magazine. And we still don't have standards that actually deal with this issue. We're still doing what? Well, hey doc, you know what? My brother-in-law or my brother had a heart attack. My family has heart attacks when we're young. How about if we do a stress test? Is a stress test going to tell you whether or not you have soft plaque, whether or not you have inflammation? No, it's not. There are times to do a stress test, but they're really way less than half of the times that stress tests are actually done. It's not that medical standards groups are not discussing it. They are. Right now, that's just not so clear to a standards group what to do with it. Folks may have questions about that. If you do, I'm certainly open to taking a whack at it. I can tell you, medical standards, gosh, 200 or 300 years ago, vitamin C was found to be something that can prevent scurvy. It took 200 years before they actually started putting limes in the ships of the British Navy. Hence, British sailors being called limeys. It took 100 years for metformin to become an actual standard after it was discovered. So even in today's world, even though it's the internet world, everything's available to the whole world in a flash, you still have to have scientists vet this thing. They still have to get through their human competitiveness regarding whether or not they discovered something. And you still have to figure out what to do about something once you find it. So it still takes on average 18 to 20 years before some of these things become standards. Last slide on inflammation, and then I'll go back and open it up to some questions. This is a slide that was developed by Cleveland Heart Labs. They're now owned by Quest. Cleveland Heart Labs and Quest still do the vast majority of our testing. And these are sort of the things that we look for. On the left, far left, you see a healthy, clean section of artery, and then it gets more and more plaque and inflammation as you go to the right. You start adding isoprostane, which is known as the lifestyle lie detector, oxidized LDL, that starts building up. Microalbumin creatinine ratio, ADMA, which I won't talk about, c-reactive protein, all of these things start piling in. Then you start getting enzymatic activity. You remember I talked about immune cells releasing enzymes? Well, two of those enzymes we actually test for. One of them is MPO, myeloperoxidase. The other one is LPPLA2. Rather than try to go through that long name, we just call it Plaque 2. Troponin and CKMB bands, they get more involved when we start actually looking at and for damage to the heart muscle. I made a mistake. I do have, I think, one more slide. So this is my own inflammation panel from, I think it's 1915, I'm not sure. That's obviously an old one. And as you see, we're actually testing for myeloperoxidase, Plaque 2, c-reactive protein, which is a protein made by the liver, and the microalbumin creatinine ratio. I'm not going to spend more time on that tonight. We go much more into detail on that in our webinar series. And we'll talk about the webinar series just a little bit later. But I'm hoping our technology worked tonight. I'm hoping that we're on. Please confirm that we are. Gosh, let me go back up. Hello, Doc. Hello from Cape Canaveral. Hey, hello, good to hear from you. That's Jim D. We got Senile Canuck. I apologize. I'm trying to move this around, and every time I do, it gets over on top of the questions. Richard Lund, yes, loud and clear. Great. Hear you fine. Fantastic. Hello from Lafayette, Louisiana. That's good to hear from Lafayette, Louisiana. E. Gandris. I don't know if I mentioned, I interned at the Big Free Charity Hospital in New Orleans. So got lots of neat memories about Cajun country. Joe Bohm or Beam, I'll go in Melbourne. Great to hear from you guys. John Anderson from Orange Park, Florida. Good to hear from you. Okay, hello from Belfast. I don't remember hearing from anybody in Belfast. Belfast. I'm assuming that's Ireland. 147 degrees west. I already gave you a shout out with the glycocalyx. Hello from Alaska. Jim D, fluid dynamics, non-laminar blood plasma colliding into the walls due to mass momentum of different size red blood cells and lipids. Well, I'm sure there's a lot of fluid dynamics there. I will tell you this, it's actually very well known that the blood does flow a lot faster in the very center of that column. I will also tell you this, in terms of orientation to size, if you start watching and there are images available out on the internet, once you get to capillary level, the capillary circumference is about the size of a red blood cell. So the red blood cells actually usually get oriented like this, and you can actually see them sort of melt through. And they're obviously squeezing past the glycocalyx as they go through. Carl Vasta, how quickly does the glycocalyx take to regenerate with low blood sugar? I wish somebody would check me out on that. I keep meaning to look that up. I don't know if it's hours or days, but it doesn't take that long. The biggest problem is most of us that have insulin resistance, for example, if you do have it and you don't know it, like 90% of us don't know it, then you don't know, you gain 10 extra pounds. That makes it a little bit worse. And gosh, believe it or not, your blood sugar is hanging around 140 to 180, maybe 6, 8, 10, 20 hours a day, because it jumps up to 160 after breakfast, stays there for 2 or 3 hours, then after lunch, then after dinner, then you have a snack or a drink or something at 8 or 9 o'clock, it starts adding up. But it's a great question. Okay, Jim D, especially at junctions. I think we're talking about the fluid dynamics again. Carrie, pardon my, I need to get some new glasses. Carl Vasta, I think. How quickly does the we already covered that. Hi from New Zealand. Good to hear from you, Carl. Is it true that smoking causes plaque too? Absolutely. Smoking is nuclear in terms of inflammation. And guess what? Inflammation starts off with burning that glycocalyx. So once you burn that glycocalyx, what's going to happen? LDL is going to start filtering through, forming plaque. B. Wood, Dr. Brewer, is there a way to prevent or redirect the mast cells from responding to the plaque? Would that be a novel way to prevent plaque erosion and possibly prevent clotting? It certainly would. And here, actually, you bring up a great point. I don't have that available, but there was a study, I think it was cover article of Scientific American last summer, maybe the summer before. I know it was covered it's called CANTOS, C-A-N-T-O-S. If you're at your computer, and I think most of you are, you can look it up. It was by, the principal investigator was Paul Ridker. Paul Ridker, by the way, is a very smart cardiologist at Brigham and Women's in Harvard. And he started noticing that statins helped, but quite often they helped even when somebody had a low LDL. So it wasn't really statins. It wasn't really LDL. He started thinking maybe it was inflammation. And he noticed this like 20 years ago. Here's where I'm going with that. There was a study called CANTOS, C-A-N-T-O-S. They took a very unusual, incredibly expensive, I'm talking about like, I think maybe $250,000 a year, biomedical anti-inflammatory shot. When they took, and they gave that in a randomized clinical trial, and guess what happened? That anti-inflammatory shot resulted in decreased heart attacks and strokes. They actually started moving ahead, trying to get an indication for heart attack and stroke prevention, even though, again, it was like $250,000 a year. And again, I'm sure it wouldn't cost quite that much now, but this was still only 2 years ago. It was a lot. Here's the problem. It's not ready for prime time. Here was the problem. That anti-inflammatory stopped immune function. It can't decide, oh, I'm only going to redirect macrocytes and immune function with the arteries. It also redirected them in other places, like resulting in more deaths associated with lung infections, pneumonias, things like that. So it traded off almost as many deaths in infections as it saved from heart attack and stroke. Great question. Again, it helps in terms of understanding the science of this and also where we are in terms of state of the art. What component of smoking does the damage? Nicotine? I do think nicotine is a major bad actor, which is very interesting because caffeine, which is very, very close to it, actually does appear to create some health. Now, how bad is nicotine alone? I don't think we know that yet. I also know that we start getting into things like Nicorette gum. And the question would be, well, would Nicorette gum not cause as many problems? I don't think it does, but I don't think we've got enough. I'm not aware of any science where we actually did long-term studies on something like other forms of nicotine only with heart attack and stroke. We do know there are a lot of other components in cigarette smoke, and I do know this. It's not very clear what all components do contribute. Hope that helped, and that gets about as far as my knowledge in that space. Okay, Chef B, I smoked 25 years, and then my CAC test came 0. I guess it depends on the genes, PPL people. Yeah, you're lucky, Chef B. You're extremely lucky. I don't know if I'd want to continue to push my luck though. Well, no other comments. Well, I will say this, something that you should know. People worry about cigarette smoking, and when they worry about it, they think about lung cancer. Cigarette smoking kills far more people from heart attack and stroke than it does from lung cancer. So yes, cigarette smoke is a problem with lung cancer, but it's a far bigger issue with heart attack and stroke. Votex 99, does pomegranate juice help clear plaque too? Pomegranate juice does have a lot of antioxidants in it. And I used to take pomegranate juice, but here's the problem with pomegranate juice. Antioxidants are not anti-inflammatories. It's a different issue. But here's the problem with pomegranate juice. It has a lot of sugar in it. And again, if you go back and consider by far the most common inflammatory driver is high blood sugar, then do you really want to take a whole bunch of sugar with your antioxidants? And that's why I quit drinking pomegranate juice. Now, before we take more questions, I'm going to go back in and talk a little bit about our services. We've had a lot of people go ahead and start calling in about the webinar series. We've had people start talking about or have already signed up. And in fact, Michelle wanted to make sure that I let you know the webinar, we're finding some costs associated with the hidden costs associated with the webinar series. We came out of the blocks, I think it was like $249, $299, $290. We've got some hidden costs there. We're going to continue to honor that price of $290 for I think it's 10 more applicants or 10 more registrants. After that, it will go up to $499. Sorry about that. We're doing what we can. So we'll talk about the webinars in just a minute. Before I do, if you haven't signed up for the, we've got a tech issue in terms of images. I'm not going to go there other than to say, if you haven't been in to look at our membership site, you can get a free membership. When you get there, let me go in and show you this. You get there. We have our courses there. We've got Plaque, Cardiovascular Inflammation. These are ways in less than 2 hours to learn a heck of a lot more than 99.9% of doctors know about either one of these issues. And we've got prediabetes now. I don't think it's quite been loaded up onto the membership site. One thing I will tell you is there's a lot of free content. You can look for example, and get samples out of each of those courses for free if you have an interest. We've got infographics. I don't know if those have been loaded yet. I've seen the infographics. They're good. They still needed a little bit of work. I don't know if we're going to wait till we get them totally perfect before we put up there or not. I prefer not. I'd rather, as you have seen from past 2 years history, I'd rather go ahead and get something up there that you can see and start getting benefit from before making it perfect. We've got the Plaque book. It's a book on plaque. Plaque is what's killing us. It's what's causing dementia. It's disabling us. It's what causes heart attacks, strokes, dementia, blindness, you name it. But what's very interesting is, have you ever thought about what's the state of the art for measuring, screening and detecting plaque? The state of the art is to say, hey, doc, you know what? I'm getting worried about this. Can we do a stress test? I'm not going to go down that line again. There are better ways. There are clearly better ways. And this is a whole book about it. We offer the intro on the book and the first chapter. You can get that for free just by going into the membership site. The webinar registrations are there as well. And the CIMT event registrations are there. We've got, I don't know that we're completely booked yet, but we're getting close in LA, Anaheim, September 28th. I think we'll have a separate slide which will cover that. And the bootcamp event, another CIMT event, but you can also get complete set of labs, plus register to see me during, after, or immediately after the bootcamp event in Louisville, November 9th. I've already had a lot of registration for that. For those of you who are really interested in the, and don't ask me why, it's my fault, but I don't want to go into that topic. In seeing the actual, the distillery tour, it's no longer free. That one's been taken up, but it's not that expensive. You can still go if you want to. To get to the membership page, you go to our website, prevmedheartrisk.com, membership login, fill out your email and create a password. Again, it's free. And then you can get all this information. The Louisville event, the September 28th CIMT event with David, and the webinar series. Just one other point about the webinar series. A lot of people don't understand, a lot of people are not aware of it. It is a great way to go ahead and find out, do I have plaque? If so, is it inflamed? Do I have insulin resistance? And, you know, people have said, doc, you're just way too expensive. I know that. And again, we're doing everything we can to make this available for people that don't own their own airplanes. As I mentioned earlier, we started coming out of the blocks at under 300. Now it's going to be a little bit under 500, and you can get the basic information. You also get 3 months worth of, you get the labs, you get 3 months worth of webinar and conference attendees, conference access. What time and dates? Right now we're still doing them at 11 on 11 Eastern time. When do those start? I think it's 2 weeks from now. Is it October 9th? We talked about the price. And I think that's it for this. LA, the CIMT event, some links that you need to know if you still want to register for the cardio risk or for the LA event, the Anaheim event. It's cardiorisk.us/healthylife, CIMT tour, cardiorisk.us/forward, webinars and everything else, myhealth at heartrisk.com. So there was obviously some commercial in that. Most of it's to help people know what's available for free or otherwise. And thank you for your patience as we went through that. Okay, JD, Doc, to follow up, I'm an ex-smoker. I feel better since I quit smoking and cardiac functions. I used to smoke pipe tobacco and didn't inhale the smoke. I'm pretty sure you got less smoke than somebody who inhaled all the way down to the bottom of their lungs, but you still, as you know, get a good bit of those products just absorbing through the mucous membranes, even of the mouth. But thank you for clarifying. James, interested in relocating next year, not sure selling my home. Well, skip over that. Good World. Hi, Doc. What do we get out of the webinar for $4.90? Okay, 3 months of, I think I've covered it, but just real quick, 3 months of access to all the content in 3 months worth of webinars. So that's, you can actually go to the webinar. And I guess one thing I didn't include is the webinar will actually provide access to your own, you'll be able to, you'll get your own lab results. Not CIMT, OGTT with insulin survey. Yeah, people have already started calling and they said, you know, that's really inexpensive. They had looked at getting these labs on their own. That's the major component, the major value thing here. You'll get the OGTT plus the inflammation panel. That will be included in that $4.90. Then you get you attend the webinars. We'll go over science like we're going over here, and then we'll answer, people can ask questions about, hey doc, I've got a 1 hour glucose of 190, and what does that mean? Or I've got a 1 hour glucose of 120, but my insulin level at 1 hour is 110. What does that mean? That means you've got insulin resistance. Even though your body's still controlling that blood sugar, it's taking twice as much insulin as you should be using to get there. And as we discussed, insulin can damage that glycocalyx as well. Okay, JD, I had a good experience with the docs at Johns Hopkins. I'm glad to hear that, JD. I'm a Hopkins grad myself, and I actually used to be faculty at Hopkins. I trained in preventive medicine there and went on to run the program in preventive medicine. Laura Dillingham, finally, I made it on this live. Congratulations, thank you. We've been having a lot of technical challenges as I don't have to share. Last week, for example, I won't go into the details on that. Joe Beam. Joe, tell me how to pronounce that last name. Dr. Brewer, wonder why hearing one more thing about grass-fed beef makes your eyes cross. Have you read that book? If you read the book, you would see. I have no problem. I think that's probably true. I think there is some component of the cows are what they eat. And I do think it's true. I do think you get vitamin K2 better from animals that are pasture-fed, grass-fed. I'm not arguing with that. I made the comment because, again, when I go through a book, usually I go through it in 2 or 3 days. And I did that one as well. And it's just that I heard it so many times. Pardon me, I'm sorry that it sounded, anyway. No argument with the point that it's better to eat grass-fed beef, at least from a science perspective. JD, I stayed in Winston for a while. I would recommend, again, guys, Doc, sorry for flooding your chat, got carried away. Thank you. James Cantor, how much vitamin D3 and K2, MK7 do you recommend? You know what, I keep getting this question. If you don't mind, give me 15 seconds. Maybe it wasn't even 15 seconds. I have absolutely no financial interest in this company. And I don't know that this company is any better than the others. But here's what I take. I get a lot of questions about this. I wanted to go ahead, keep meaning to get that out there. I've actually answered many questions about it. So what I'm taking is K2D3, and there's 100 micrograms of K2 MK7 in there. I think you can see that, 100 micrograms of K2 and K7. Now, there's also 125 micrograms of vitamin D3, and I think that's like 5,000 international units. Now, that's not all I'm taking though. I don't have it here, and it's down in the kitchen. I'd go get it. I also, if you might remember, I'm putting natto powder in my coffee. So that's another separate source of K2. Terry Wyatt, hello from Utah. Oh, good world. Thanks for answering my question, Doc. That is indeed very affordable. Yeah, I'm not good at a sales pitch kind of thing, and a lot of people don't really understand what they're getting. And I thank you very much, actually, Good World, for making people aware. We're not trying to make money with this channel. We're trying to help. This is a legacy thing. Well, we're not wealthy, but we're not bad off either. Our goal is to retire. And my big goal is to help save lives on my next 30 years on my way out. I'm 62. I plan to die. I don't know if I'm going to make it in my hundreds. Maybe. Anyway, our goal is to make this stuff available. And what a lot of people don't realize is that usually if you just go get those labs yourself, you're paying $300, $400. Here's what started it. Again, Bart Robinson, I keep linking this to you. It may be somebody else, but somebody asked me after seeing one of John's videos, they said, we can't get the inflammation panel anymore on the do-it-yourself from Quest. So I called them. They redirected me back around to a bunch of places. They did not answer my question, but I heard it from multiple sources. I can't help but believe you. I can still get the inflammation panel. That's what started this whole ball rolling to doing a webinar series. That's not really the big, knowledge is value, and this is very valuable, but that's not where the cost is. The cost is in the labs themselves. Terry Wyatt, hello from Utah, was in Todd's office. That must mean Todd Eldridge, the guy I'm writing the book with on CIMT, Plaque. When he talked, he walked in talking on his phone to you, got my CIMT. Thanks for the education and motivation. Thank you, Terry, for listening. And even more so for taking the effort to get out there and take care of your health. It takes some effort, but once people get started, they're usually glad they did. Rob TO7, good to hear from you, Rob. Doc, what do you think of maltodextrin as a carb source to add to whey protein? Malto has been a staple of bodybuilding meal replacements for 30 years. I know that, I'm aware of it, but I don't know enough of the science behind maltodextrin. Excuse me. I don't know enough about the science about maltodextrin to have an opinion. I'd love to hear if you have a concern. I would offer to look it up, but I've got so many people asking for stuff right now. I'm trying to work on my priority list. By the way, I'm trying to drink water while I speak instead of cough. I saw a patient yesterday, and at the end he said, you know, you didn't cough once over a full hour period. And I said, I know where you're going. I think you think there's some sort of maybe psychological overlay to my coughing. I'm not going to argue. Maybe there is. I just don't think he's seen all of my, I've done a lot of videos. And for example, this one, I don't think I've coughed that much. Anyway, pardon me for sharing personal stuff. Votex99, thanks for answering my questions. You're very welcome, Votex. James Cantor. I'm taking D3 5,000 international units and K2 100 micrograms. That's the same thing I'm taking. Do you think we should go to 200 since a lot of studies use 180? I think I may already be at 200 because as I mentioned, I'm taking another source as well, a very different kind of source. It tastes really, really bad, and I do it every day. Bart Robinson, I don't know if you heard, I was talking about you. I currently take Life Extension Multi that has 2,000 IUs of D3. Do you suggest people to get a blood test before increasing to 5,000? That's a really, really good question, Bart, I've mentioned this several times, but you know, there's a lot of videos out there. I think I'm the only one that's seen all of them. I've had people swear to me that they've seen all of them, but I'm still a little bit skeptical. Anyway, there have been studies on how safe it is to take D3. You know, you can take too much. It can kill you. It can mess up your kidneys really bad. However, there's been studies on 5,000 international units, and 5,000, all those studies have shown people are safe at 5,000 international units. I do not feel like you have to get D3 studies and D3 levels to go up to that level of supplementation. I think that's, you can do that supplementation and not worry about it. Bart Robinson, okay, we already covered that. 147, this thing keeps jumping. Some people get an insulin spike from maltodextrin and some don't. I don't, hubby does. You have to test it with a glucometer. Okay, thank you very much. 147. B. Wood, James Cantor, good question. I've been wondering about going to 200 micrograms as well. Yeah, if that's your only source, I probably would go to 200. 147, glucometer, Licks 59. Afternoon health fans. Hey Doc, Jim D, what are your thoughts about heavy water deuterium? There's not much air in the windmills of my mind on that one. 147, I booted mine to 200 micrograms too. JD, loved your recent non-biased K2 videos, Doc. Still many ongoing stuff. Thank you very much, JD, I appreciate that. One of them I listened to and I couldn't even follow myself. I do appreciate the patience with, that you guys sometimes have to show. Me not understanding completely sometimes doesn't stop me from trying to explain it. But yes, the issue, I went ahead and forged ahead on a lot of the K2 studies, and here's why. As you may know, the internet and the books and all the media are full of K2 is wonderful. It's going to take all the calcium out of your heart. So if you had a positive calcium score, take some K2 and it's going to cure you. No, that's not the case. My original foray into K2 was, what, 2 years ago, and I went straight to the randomized clinical trials. There were some, and they were underwhelming. The only one that showed, there was one that showed some positive stuff. I think it was the Rotterdam trial. And that still wasn't that strong at all. So I panned it. Then when I read the book that I made the comment about, if I hear one more thing about grass-fed beef. That book was really good. I forget the name of the author. It's a French female, French-Canadian female. And she's, I think, a doctor of nutrition. It's a very good book. I'd clearly recommend it. You learned a lot. And what that did was it got me looking a little bit deeper in terms of the science. And that's where I got intrigued by this whole osteocalcin story and the clear linkage between enzymes and other molecules that are impacted by K2, which also in turn impact insulin resistance. So I think there's a very interesting additional story there. But people keep asking, well, you know, tell us, should we take it or not? You're often not going to get that from this channel. I'm going to give you the facts. I'm not going to tell you I take it and then, hey, by the way, buy all of mine. I'm going to give you the facts, and unfortunately, the facts aren't always conclusive. Bart Robinson, thanks for the update on the inflammation panel situation. You're very welcome. And Bart, I keep pegging you with having made that comment. I hope I was right. Lex 59, I've been 5,100 D3 K2 for a couple of years. Good for you. We are getting close to an hour. I still got a lot of interest. I appreciate the interest that we've been getting. I'm going to cut it off though, because if you go longer than an hour, believe it or not, there's a lot more people that watch these videos after the event. And if they start seeing it going on over an hour, unless it's an interview with a public luminary, they tend to not watch it. So unless somebody's got anything else urgent or pressing, I'm going to sign off. Rob T07, they call maltodextrin a complex carb, but supposedly has a glycemic index. Okay, thank you very, very much. And we'll talk to you next week. If I can turn this off.